Please join me in welcoming Amanda Dell.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you. I think I will wear my glasses. Everyone, if anyone needs a little stretch or anything, feel free to get going on that. Okay, I need to get it in this place that I'm supposed to be. So thank you so much to Eventbrite and Alex and the whole team for having me. It really, to hopefully channel a little bit of Zarita's joy, it is so joyful just to be in the same room with everyone, and excited to talk to you all after. As Alex, in his excellent introduction, shared, today what I'm going to do is a little bit of storytelling. Storytelling is really all about finding something that will resonate with everyone, no matter what the story is about. And at Jewish Food Society, the core of our work is storytelling. And so we do that in many different ways. And I'm very excited to share how we transitioned, reimagined one of our live events called Schmaltzy into a podcast. So I will take my clicker. Everyone still with me?
Yep.
Okay. So first things first, what is Jewish Food Society? So I don't think we're quite a household name yet, but hopefully we are heading that way. So we are a nonprofit organization. We're based here in New York City, and we have a very simple mission. We work to preserve, celebrate, and revitalize Jewish culinary heritage from all around the world. We do that in a variety of ways, but the core of our work is a digital recipe archive. So we are building an archive with family recipes from places as far apart as Ethiopia, as Sweden, Japan even, and of course right here in New York. So what we do on our archive is basically in the before times, and we've had to adjust obviously for the pandemic, we would actually go into people's homes. We would cook with them. We would capture their knowledge, their recipes, their history, and then we bring that back to our test kitchen. We test all of our recipes, we create our own visual content, and then we share that on our archive. And really, the motivation for doing this work is these recipes and our cultural DNA is really in danger of being lost. So that is why we want to capture these incredible stories and histories and be able to share them in a format that we feel like is inspiring and accessible for everyone. So this here is a Rosh Hashanah dinner from Chef Inat Edmoni. I don't know if you know her. She has restaurants in New York, Taim and Bella Busta. And this is a table that's inspired by her Iranian, her Moroccan, and her Yemenite roots. So my job as program director, I get to have a lot of fun because what I do is I bring this recipe archive to life. So I get to imagine and create events that will bring this archive off of the page, off of the screen, and into real life. And so really events were the cornerstone of what we did at Jewish Food Society. We would do events like a Passover dinner with the James Beard Foundation. We did holiday demos in Union Square Green Market, which I don't know if everyone knows is going on today, and it's the partner organization of Project Farmhouse, where we are. And so we would head to the Green Market where there would be thousands of people, and we would feature a recipe from our archive and show people how they could use Green Market ingredients to make one of our recipes. So events were a big, big part of what we did. Our signature event, which we have done many times in New York, San Francisco, Tel Aviv, is called Schmaltzy. Schmaltzy is a storytelling and tasting event that really became our flagship kind of cornerstone event. A little bit more about Schmaltzy. We invite 5 leaders in our community to take the stage to tell a very personal and poignant story about a crossroads in their life, about a decision that needed to be made, about something that maybe completely upended or changed their life. And so they come to the stage telling this story completely from memory. The story also, in some way, is about a food and how that food played into their story. So this you'll see here is Zoe Kanan. She's a pastry chef here in New York. She is telling a story about her grandmother's honey cake, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. And one of the best parts of Schmaltzy, I think, is that after everyone told their story, we got to taste the food behind the story. So it was a real party. So, to say that we had to think about things in a completely new way when we couldn't gather in person is an understatement, for sure, as I think many organizations, shared as their experience. Okay, well, I don't think there's any surprise here. We know what happened. All of a sudden, we were in a global pandemic. It was a deeply unsettling and, just a time that was fraught with so much anxiety. We had never been in something like this before. And, as many other organizations, Rita mentioned, that we had to transition into virtual programming. It was never something we did before. My joy and my pleasure in life has always been gathering people in person. How can, and really just feeling that energy in the room. So we experimented a lot. Some of our virtual programs were successful, some not so much, and we had to adjust and move from there. I think that one silver lining that happened during our exploration into virtual programming was really being able to see that our community could tune into our events from all over the world at the same time. And I know it seems obvious now, but it was something that I, as a program person, didn't really think about as we were creating our events. And so we would, see people tuning in from Paris or tuning in from South Africa, and we would all be in the same room, quote unquote, together. And so as we started to think about the next phase of what our virtual programming would be, and we really asked ourselves the question, how could we inspire our community around the world? How could we engage with them? How could we bring them some sort of comfort in this time of deep uncertainty? And in the back of our minds, we were always thinking about this amazing thing that happened where everyone could tune into our virtual events at the same time, but not be in the same place, and how actually that was a huge positive. So we really came together as a team and thought about what the next thing that we could do that would be inspiring and that would be something that we could bring to the next wave of our virtual programming. Okay, then we had an aha moment. We were sitting on what I lovingly refer to as audio gold. We had recorded all of our live stories from our Schmaltzy events. And we had, this incredible audio saved. We didn't know, exactly what we were gonna do with it at the time. And so we went back, we listened to every single story that was ever recorded at a Schmaltzy event and kind of thought about how we could transition that into a podcast. And we kept this format very, very simple. Schmaltzy episodes are comprised of a live story from the stage, and then I get to sit down and have an interview with the storyteller. Now, the interviews are a place where we use the story as a jumping off point, but what I'm most interested in the interviews is themes that are universal. Love, loss, family, and of course, identity. So this is just a little trailer that we created when we launched Schmaltzy about a year and a half ago 2 years ago in September. Is that right? We are time is fluid these days. We created 2 seasons and we are working on a 3rd season now. So this is our trailer when we first launched. From the Jewish Food Society, I'm Amanda Dell. And I want to tell you all about Schmaltzy, a new podcast about storytelling, food, and everything in between. For the past 3 years, the Jewish Food Society has produced Schmaltzy.
There is no gathering of Jews anywhere without food.
A live storytelling event where celebrity chefs, grandmas, tech entrepreneurs, and culinary mavens told personal stories about Jewish food.
I never knew if I was waking up to a chopped liver in the morning or a horse's head.
And then I get up and I start passionately explaining my love for gefilte fucking fish. And I was met with blank stares.
There were tears.
If you know anything about chemotherapy, you know that it does a number on your taste buds. At one point I said to him, if it gets to the point where you weigh less than I do, I'm going to be really mad.
There were laughs.
Fantasy rolls are what kosher Jews call dragon rolls, because dragons are not kosher.
There was a lot of nostalgia.
The bagel was there as a rocker. The bagel was there as a b-boy, just like the Jewish boy was there under all of it, which I think is a pretty cool thing to be.
Please subscribe so you don't miss the first episode when we launch on September 15th. You can still subscribe, don't worry. So, as I mentioned, we have done 2 seasons. We're working on our 3rd season, and now we have a moment to reflect and think about kind of how we did it, how we are doing it, what we want to do for the future, and I hope that these takeaways are helpful as you might be building some of your programming or reimagining how you want to use pieces from programs that you've done in the before times. So we invested in documentation. Again, it sounds like something that you wouldn't necessarily, that's kind of a natural or a given. But when we were doing our live events, we thought about them really as a moment in that time, as something that was, happening just that day, just that time for everyone in the room. Now, we knew we needed to record the stories, but we really invested in bringing in a professional audio team to capture these stories in a really great quality. And we didn't exactly know what we would do with that. So as you're either coming back to in-person events or as you're still doing virtual events, invest in documentation, whatever that means, whether it's photography, whether it's videography, whether it's audio, or anything that you feel like can capture some of the events that you're working on now. You don't need to know how you're going to use it. We got creative and challenged our team. I had done a very casual podcast before, but I had never done a produced podcast before. I never interviewed people, with that level of seriousness before. So I had to challenge myself to take a storytelling class, to attend other workshops, to really dig in and do my own learning. So I encourage you, if you have an idea for your team, throw the gauntlet down. I think that they'll rise to the occasion and hopefully surprise you. The last thing we did is really leverage our existing resources and community. This is a big one. We really leaned into our existing channels of communication. So the 2, that were top for us are our newsletter and our social media. So as we were, creating the podcast, we thought about how we would be able to spread that, the news of our launch and all of the episodes through our channels. And what I mean by leverage existing resources is really this is the time to call in some favors. When you're creating something new, I reached out to, some graphic designers I hadn't worked with for a while and told them exactly what we were doing and tried to say, this is our budget, this is what we have. Can you get behind it with us? We, reached out to musicians to create our music, and just that, this was something that was, probably not in their wheelhouse of just creating a short little, music to start a podcast. They had been working on way bigger projects. So it's just a time to call in the favors that you want to try to get done in order to move your project, forward. So now that we had this podcast and we were pretty stoked, we had to think about our marketing. And again, as a small nonprofit, we had to get creative in how we were going to do that, how we were going to let people know about our podcast, and how you, hopefully this will be helpful as you think about how you're going to continue to build and grow your community. So as I mentioned, we had our newsletter, we had our social media, we, definitely were going to use and lean on those to let people know. But we got a little creative, and I think we got a little old school when we launched the podcast. So we decided to go back to something that I think had been done a lot previously, which is, send people packages. I think this was a time, when for a lot of people, this was the only way that they were really receiving, anything from the outside world. So we asked Zoe, who told a story about honey cake, to actually bake 40 honey cakes. And we created a little honey cake package, and we honey cake bombed people by dropping these packages off at their front door. And it came with a card. It let people know we are launching a podcast. Zoe Kanan is telling a story about honey cake and about Rosh Hashanah to launch this season, and you can taste the dish behind her story. And this was something that we definitely invested in, and we found the resources, to activate on. And then I was like, this is great. People are gonna get a honey cake. It's awesome. They'll learn about the podcast. But then I was like, but how are they gonna listen to the podcast? That's the whole point. And I was very nervous to try to use these QR codes because I kind of thought, are QR codes like a dinosaur? Is it going to be like a VHS tape? But as I started to see more restaurants and bars using them, I felt emboldened, and I was like, I want to try it and see, if it would work. And I knew that if we designed something that was clever, we could hopefully get people to just hover their phone over it, open it, and people would become accustomed to this practice if they weren't already. So this approach to marketing, I think, was a little bit digital, and it was a little bit old school. And so, again, it's thinking about your community, thinking about what you think will bring them excitement and joy, and then just really digging in and trying to find the resources, to do that. There were a lot of difficult days in making the podcast or making any new, project and being in the depths of this pandemic. But I share this quote with you as, encouragement, and it is the quote that I refer back to all of the time to let me know that I'm on the right path. And I think if nothing else is ever written about this podcast, I'll be good after this. It says, Schmaltzy is the podcast version of a meal that somehow always tastes better when someone you love cooks it for you. I didn't pay them to say that. Okay, to summarize, and I hope share some helpful takeaways, I think about what we created with Schmaltzy the podcast, stemming from Schmaltzy, our live event, as take what you know and add to it. We, had to really go back and think about what was the most meaningful part of our events. And for us, it was the extension of our storytelling. We tell stories on our archive, we tell stories through our events, and we tell stories at Schmaltzy. And so we always wanted to go back to that and think about, again, how to share these stories now in the most wide way. Don't be afraid to try something new. I think this is something that Zarita definitely touched on. we are still in this pandemic. The rules are being rewritten every single day. The rules of marketing, the rules of content, the rules of, how we do our events. And this is the time to try. In one way, the stakes have never been higher, and in another way, the stakes have never been lower. So I encourage you to just, if you have an idea, just try it. This is the moment to reinvent and recreate. And lastly, very lastly, what I'll leave you with is lead with the soul of your mission and its core values. At Jewish Food Society, we want to preserve and celebrate and revitalize, these traditions that are potentially being lost. We also want to celebrate the diversity of the Jewish people, showcase that Jews live all over the world. They have unique micro-cuisines. We might not just think about, bagels and babka and other, Ashkenazi city foods, but Jewish food is so much more than that. And that's when we always, go back to that, and we always go back to the core and the soul of our mission, we can't lose. So, thank you so much.